We're also familiar with how schools are, that it's actually really hard to imagine how to do it in a different way.
And when you do start to imagine a different way to do school, you realize it's not that simple.
When you start to pick apart the structure of school, you realize it is incredibly complex.
And the redesigning schools requires the consideration of many different people to re-envision how we could redo something that we've been doing for hundreds of years.
I'm Fiona Young, a studio director at Hayball Architects. I'm also a researcher in the field of learning environments and have recently completed my PhD at the Learning Environments Applied Research Centre at the University of Melbourne.
And I'm Natalia an associate at Hayball Architects and also a researcher with a focus on spaces for play in the urban realm.
I'm Ricky Gagliardi, and I'm an architectural master's student at the University of Technology, Sydney. In the first semester, I took the after-school studio, which Nat and Fiona led.
So at the beginning of this year, Nat and I had the opportunity to design an architecture studio from scratch. We wanted to look beyond traditional schools and explore what a more networked and connected model of school might be. So it was really great to be able to draw on my research on learning environments and Nat's research on play in the urban realm for this.
This was our after-school class. There were 18 students at all different stages of doing their master's degree.
So over 13 weeks, the students met with 19 different experts in and around the field of education, from academics to technologists to educational consultants and principals.
They were also introduced to representatives from 4 different schooling systems where the site for the project was located. This was in Epping, a northwest suburb of Sydney. These systems were essentially our client, whom the CommonCampus was designed around.
Through our conversations, we learned that with our current model of schooling, there were issues around inequity, disengagement, and well-being.
So as a group, through many conversations, the students developed the brief for the project.
And this led to the vision statement for the studio. Imagine if education was more equitable and inclusive, where students have the autonomy and agency to engage in intergenerational learning that's distributed through the community, and where outdoor learning and play is encouraged.
And here is our proposition for CommonCampus.
In our current model, many siloed schools coexist. In fact, on our site, there were over 14 public and independent schools. Within this radius, there are universities, polytechnics, and other learning facilities.
Yet if we look at the broader context beyond the school grounds, there's multiple opportunities for learning.
These could be outdoor spaces, spaces in the community,
or in partnership with local businesses.
So if we harnessed this collective learning capacity, what could a CommonCampus look like?
CommonCampus has 2 types of sites. Learning hubs, where students check in and use it like their home base. Each hub might accommodate between 200 to 1,200 students across a day, and often across different stages of learning. Learning nodes. These are places in the community that offer opportunities for specialist learning programs. These spaces are rich in experiences and skill sharing.
But before we could design any buildings, we needed to redesign the system.
So firstly, the curriculum. The largest percentage of time was spent on project-based activities, where students learn through key topics or issues inspired by their passions. Here, learning is interdisciplinary in nature and demonstrated and assessed via portfolios. And then there are masterclasses, which are more teacher-directed and support students to get the necessary skills and cognitive development needed to support their project and community-based learning. A quarter of the learning is based in the community. This is usually self-directed and collaborative.
Given that we had students of all ages going to a range of different places in the community to learn, we needed infrastructure to enable this to run smoothly and to ensure student safety. We called this the School Operating System, also known as SOS.
From a physical perspective, we designed the experience so that younger students had access to closer facilities and had a much smaller radius of movement. Everything was within walking distance, and routes were designed to be child-friendly in nature. They even incorporated learning opportunities through the journeys.
For more independent older students, they might access specialist facilities that were a bit further away, so both a bike path and a shuttle loop were set up.
A core part of CommonCampus was the network of local volunteers to support the system. The volunteers were typically retired members of the community with a desire to contribute back to their communities. So they would all be trained to support students moving between different venues or in supporting educators and community facilities to deliver the programs. In return, volunteers were offered goods, services, and access to facilities which CommonCampus could provide in return.
The other critical glue to making the system work was the SOS app. This was tailored to different age students, so they knew what their lessons were each week and where they would take place. For parents, it could be used to communicate with teachers and volunteers and to get feedback on student activities and progress. For teachers, it could be used for scheduling to help advise students on learning opportunities and to provide formative assessment. And for volunteers, they could see what support was required each week and where.
One last critical thing we considered was the governance of the CommonCampus. So you'll recall we positioned this proposition around 4 different independent and public schooling systems.
CommonCampus is owned collectively by all these entities. The system is governed by a board with representatives from each governing body. The model is based on a sharing economy, facilitated by a community-based and online platform, where each school system has access to a pool of goods, services, and facilities. Each of the learning hubs, regardless of whether they're faith-based, single-sex, or co-ed, is leased from CommonCampus. It becomes the home of the community who use it for a period of time. And all the learning nodes can be accessed by any of the students, regardless of which home base they come from.
One other critical player in this system are engagement curators. They act as bridges between learning hubs and learning nodes, helping educators and students understand the learning opportunities they can access in the community, and they work with learning nodes and volunteers to shape the student experience. They're like real estate agents of learning who are able to broker connections between people, services, and spaces.
So that is how the CommonCampus system works. We realise it's a lot to take in, as it was for us, to get our heads around. So perhaps the best way to illustrate how it works is through a day in the life of CommonCampus.